I am Aurelian, a son of humble tenant farmers, born in Sirmium. My youthful years were spent tilling the soil before the call of the Roman military claimed my path. Rising rapidly through the ranks due to my leadership and skill, I served diligently under emperors such as Gallienus and Claudius. In 270, I took up the mantle of emperor during a tumultuous period. The Roman Empire was fractured, with the Gallic Empire to the west and Palmyrene Empire to the east, both claiming independence. I was resolute in my aim to heal and reunify Rome. Through strategic military campaigns, I subdued the separatist territories and quelled internal insurrections. My reign was not only defined by military victories, I took decisive steps to strengthen the empire economically and administratively, reforming the Roman coinage and fortifying our cities. In addition, I championed the cult of Sol Invictus, providing a common spiritual focus for our people. In essence, my life's journey, from a farmer's son to the Emperor of Rome, is a testament to resilience and loyalty to the empire.
The early years. Lucius Domitius Aurelianus was born on the 9th of September in the year 214 or 215, possibly born in the vicinity of Serdica. Of his background and early life, very little can be said with any degree of confidence, as our only source for his early years is the Historia Augusta. But there is no obvious reason for deception, but keep that in mind as we move forward. His father was said to have been a farmer to a senator, and his mother was a priestess of a local sun god. When he was around 20 years old, he would have enlisted in the Roman army, circa 235, as an infantry soldier. He was described as comely and good to look upon with manly grace. He first appears in the historical account when he was part of a garrison of 300 men that intercepted a Gothic raid into the Balkans. He allegedly killed 48 barbarians in one day and another 950 over the following days. This claim seems ridiculous at face value, but it seems that his military ability was recognized early on in his career. In fact, a poem was written following this astonishing feat. Thousand he have beheaded, a single man 1,000 he have beheaded, 1,000 cups he may drink who 1,000 has killed. No one has scarcely so much wine as the amount of blood that he shed. We don't know exactly when this occurred, but Aurelian quickly advanced in the ranks, first becoming a centurion. And the next time we hear of him, he was a military tribune on the Rhine in an otherwise unknown legion, Legio XI Gallicana. There he aided the destruction of Frankish warbands that were raiding Roman land in 254 to 258. This time he was credited with killing 700 barbarians and capturing 300. While military tribune, he received the nickname Aurelian Hand to Sword. Historical background. Philip the Arab celebrated Rome's 1,000-year anniversary with grandeur in 248. However, his reign was plagued by the constant threat of invasions. In the Balkans, the Goths were growing increasingly aggressive. When Philip returned to Rome after a victorious campaign in 247, the area became increasingly exposed to Gothic incursions. In 249, the general Pacatianus was proclaimed ruler by the Danubian army in response to the Gothic threat. Rather than confront the situation himself, Philip sent the seasoned general Decius to quash the rebellion. Decius successfully defeated the revolt, and Pacatianus was killed. Subsequently, both armies declared Decius the new emperor, who then eliminated Philip in a decisive battle near Verona. During Decius's reign, the Goths and the Carpi seized their opportunity to attack. They raided several territories, including Moesia and Thrace, while the Roman armies were distracted by internal strife. Decius eventually fell at the hands of the Goths at Abritus in 251, a devastating defeat that tarnished Rome's military prestige. After Decius's demise, the remnants of his army elected Trebonianus Gallus as the new emperor. Gallus, however, proved unable to fend off the Goths, allowing them to retreat with their spoils. He formed a new imperial triumvirate with Decius's surviving son, Hostilianus, and his own son. Hostilianus, though, soon disappeared under mysterious circumstances. In 253, following a string of invasions, Aemilianus, the governor of Moesia, was proclaimed emperor by his troops. He didn't reign long, however. As he marched to meet Gallus's general Valerian, his own men assassinated him, leaving Valerian as the uncontested ruler of the empire. Valerian's rule began with significant challenges. The Balkans were in a critical state following Decius's defeat at Abritus. The Persians had overrun most of Syria, and the Rhine was under attack from the Alemanni. His reign saw him prioritizing the defense of the Danubian frontier and grappling with continued Gothic raids. Upon Valerian's capture by the Persians in 259, his son Gallienus became the sole ruler. His reign was marked by challenges, including a devastating plague, continued invasions, and internal revolts. In the midst of these crises, the Roman Empire effectively split into three distinct regions: the Gallic Empire in the west, the Palmyrene Empire in the east, and the remaining central part of the Roman Empire, including Italy, the Balkans, and the North African provinces. This shifting landscape represented a significant transition in the control and protection of these regions. It signaled a new era in the annals of the empire's history. It also illustrates the complexities and challenges of ruling an expansive and diverse empire. The once unassailable empire now grappled with relentless assaults from all directions. In the late summer of 267, Emperor Gallienus left Italy to counter a major Gothic invasion of the Balkans and Asia Minor, entrusting the defense of Italy to Aureolus. Among Gallienus's senior officers was Aurelian. Marcianus, a top general under Gallienus, encountered the invaders in Boeotia. Although he couldn't fully stop them, he pushed them northwards. In spring 268, Gallienus met them in the Nisus Valley, where he won a decisive battle. News soon reached Gallienus that Aureolus had revolted in Italy. Gallienus rushed to quell the rebellion, taking Aurelian with him, marking a critical juncture in the Roman Empire's history. Aureolus had the chance to claim the title of emperor for himself, but he instead aligned with Postumus, issuing coins from the Milan Mint in Postumus's name. He hoped this would garner support from the Rhine legions against Gallienus, but Postumus refused involvement in his risky venture. By early summer, Gallienus and his army reached northern Italy, confronting Aureolus close to Milan. Aureolus was defeated and forced to retreat to Milan, triggering a prolonged siege. Among Gallienus's senior officers were the Illyrian generals Aurelian, Heraclianus, and Claudius. Dissatisfied with Gallienus's leadership, they plotted his removal, with the support of the cavalry commander Cecropius. A trap was set, and while Gallienus rushed to respond to a reported sortie by Aureolus, he was assassinated, and the conspirators quickly elevated Claudius to power. Gallienus's brother, Licinius Valerianus, shared his fate, as did several others associated with Gallienus's regime. The plot's success was facilitated by a sizable donation. Claudius promptly set about asserting his control, even forcing the Senate to deify Gallienus. Aurelian flourished during Claudius's reign, taking command of the Dalmatian horse and ultimately overseeing all cavalry. Meanwhile, Aureolus, after hearing about Gallienus's death, attempted reconciliation with the new emperor. However, Aureolus was killed, possibly by his own troops. Soon, Claudius faced the threat of barbarian tribes exploiting the chaos in Roman territory. Claudius, along with Aurelian, managed to defeat the Alemanni at Lake Garda in 269. Although severely weakened, after Gallienus's victory at the Battle of Nisus, the Goths were still inside the Roman Empire, so Claudius sent Aurelian to the Balkans to deal with marauders once and for all. On the Rhine, one of Postumus's generals, Laelianus, rebelled. Claudius contemplated intervening in the western provinces, but decided the Balkan situation demanded his immediate attention, perhaps fearing that Aurelian would proclaim himself emperor after mopping up the remaining Gothic armies. Claudius left his brother in charge of safeguarding Italy while he was in the Balkans. The Goths were trapped in the Haemus Mountains, slowly starving. Aurelian was unable or unwilling to procure a decisive victory, perhaps planning to starve them out, or was unwilling to risk the lives of his troops in a bloody battle. While on his way to assist Aurelian, Claudius fell ill and died at Sirmium. Rise to power. Upon hearing of his brother's death, Quintillus was promptly declared emperor by the troops with him in Italy. The Roman Senate was aware that the influential Aurelian was a likely successor. Even though Aurelian's troops were superior in numbers and quality, Quintillus's forces were closer at hand. Hence, the Senate swiftly endorsed Quintillus. They also honored Claudius by deifying him and commissioning a golden statue in Jupiter's temple. However, Quintilis's reign was short-lived, barely lasting 2 months, and was barely recorded in history before being overshadowed by events in the Balkans. When news of Claudius's death reached Aurelian, he was still dealing with the Goths in Thrace. Known for his decisive role in the Gothic Wars, Aurelian was already highly respected among his fellow officers and soldiers, who now expected him to succeed Claudius. Details surrounding the events are unclear, such as whether Aurelian's elevation was planned before or after learning about Quintilis's coup. What we do know is that the Danubian army proclaimed Aurelian emperor. There's a claim that Claudius, on his deathbed, had chosen Aurelian as his successor, and that Aurelian's elevation happened simultaneously with Quintilis's. These assertions seem more like propaganda from Aurelian's camp, aimed at downplaying Quintilis's reign. Aurelian was around 56 when he assumed power. Upon learning about Aurelian's ascension, Quintilis rallied his troops at Aquileia. Despite his apparent readiness, many, likely including Quintilis himself, questioned his capability to face Aurelian in battle. With Aurelian's significant military reputation and strong soldier support, Quintilis's Senate endorsement seemed insignificant. As Aurelian's forces approached, Quintilis sensed his doom. By the time Aurelian arrived at Aquileia, Quintilis's reign had ended, either by murder or suicide to avoid the humiliation of defeat, leaving Aurelian unchallenged in control of the central portion of the empire. Emperor. Aurelian may have vanquished his immediate imperial competitor, but his grip on power was anything but assured. To the east, the swelling might of Palmyra's military was posing a serious challenge to Rome's dominion, and to the west, the Gallic and British provinces still fell under the sway of the Gallic Empire. And in the Balkans, the Gothic invasion was yet to be fully vanquished. Tracing the course of the following events is a Herculean task. The sources are shrouded in ambiguity, leading to a multitude of interpretations amongst scholars. This raises debate on the identities of the invaders, the sequence and locations of their incursions, and even the tally of these invasions during the period of 270-271. Thus, the narrative that will be presented is an interpretation that, in my estimation, offers the most plausible reconstruction of these events. In November, Emperor Aurelian arrived in Aquileia, welcomed with a joyous roar of acclamation by the very soldiers who had recently pledged to defend Italy against him. Quickly seizing control of Italian mints in Milan and Rome, he ordered the minting of coins commemorating his respected predecessor Claudius, partly to reassure the Senate of his peaceful intentions. Yet, even as he consolidated his rule, news arrived of threats brewing on the Pannonian frontier. Upon receiving news of Quintilis's demise, the Roman Senate promptly shifted their loyalty to Aurelian, celebrating his peaceful victory. A delegation of senior senators ventured north to express their unwavering allegiance to their new emperor, meeting him at Ravenna in November. It was here that Aurelian heard of disturbances brewing along the Middle Danube. Aurelian's campaign to Italy had left the Pannonian frontier exposed, enticing the Asding Vandals to amass an army near Aquincum, modern-day Budapest. Swiftly, Aurelian returned to Aquileia to rally his forces and gather necessary provisions. He retraced his journey out of Italy over the Julian Alps, reaching Pannonia as the year neared its end. He set up his base at Siscia, the regional mint city. In accordance with long-standing tradition, Aurelian began his reign as consul on New Year's Day in 271. It was noteworthy that he assumed this office without even visiting Rome, signaling the capital's waning role in imperial affairs. While the Vandals had overrun the river and began looting the villages, the season's progression hindered their efforts to sustain themselves. Aurelian, aware of their unpreparedness for a siege, ordered the evacuation of all food and livestock into fortified cities. After this attrition strategy sufficiently weakened the Vandals and his own forces were in order, he strategically moved to confront them. The campaign was grueling and protracted due to the winter season. Despite early setbacks, Aurelian's forces managed to inflict a defeat substantial enough to halt the Vandals. Opting for peace, the Vandals accepted a treaty with Rome where they would surrender hostages, contribute 2,000 horsemen to the Roman army, and let the Romans oversee their trade. The Romans reciprocated with safe passage and ample food supplies for their journey to the Danube frontier. A few rogue Vandals deviated, but were swiftly dealt with. Aurelian had little time to relish in his victory, as news soon reached him of the Juthungi invasion further upstream on the Danube. Capitalizing on Aurelian's preoccupation in Pannonia, they wreaked havoc across Rhaetia and made their way to Italy, threatening the empire's heart. Aurelian quickly dispatched his main army to Italy, retaining only a handful of elite troops in Pannonia to manage the Vandals and secure the frontier. Assured of Pannonia's defense, he sped to Italy and joined his main army near the Dolomites. He found that the Juthungi had already sacked Placentia and invited them to surrender. Without a chance to rest, Aurelian pursued the invaders. His army, fatigued from a series of forced marches, was ambushed near Placentia, causing significant losses and enabling the Germans to advance towards Rome. News of this debacle caused panic in Rome. The once impregnable city, having outgrown its ancient walls and relied on its legions for protection, seemed defenseless against the foreign threat. The ancient Sibylline books were consulted, and the religious rites they prescribed were believed to have saved the city from the Germans. Aurelian managed to regroup his forces and trailed the destructive path left by the Juthungi, who turned inland towards Rome. Here, at the banks of the Metaurus, he finally engaged them in a pitched battle, emerging victorious. Many Juthungi soldiers found themselves pinned against the river, leading to their defeat and death by drowning. Despite their loss, the Juthungi maintained enough confidence to sue for peace, believing they still held a position of strength. Dexippus's Sithica recounts the negotiation, where the German envoys bragged about their forces' size and penetration into the empire. Unimpressed, Aurelian refused to allow such a substantial enemy force to return home with their spoils, denying them safe passage. The victory, although not total, halted the Juthungi's advancement. They had to retreat via the Via Aemilia, with Aurelian in pursuit, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. When the Juthungi reached the plains near Ticinum, Aurelian attacked decisively, routing the enemy once again. Surviving Juthungi were neutralized swiftly. This triumph turned the tide of the campaign, and Aurelian adopted the title Germanicus Maximus. Nearly 9 months into his reign, Aurelian was finally able to head to Rome, although his reception wasn't as triumphant as expected. While Aurelian had been engaged in military operations in northern Italy, civil unrest stirred again. A revolt in Dalmatia, perhaps triggered by news of Aurelian's challenges in Italy, led troops to declare their military governor, Septimius, as emperor. This rebellion, however, was short-lived, with Septimius eventually killed by his own soldiers. Around the same time, a potentially more significant uprising, centered on Domitianus, a former general of Gallienus, occurred. The revolt's location remains unknown, but a coin bearing Domitianus's name as emperor discovered in France suggests southeastern Gaul. The rebellion was possibly sparked by the Juthungian invasion and likely quelled by Julius Placidianus. With Domitianus's demise, Aurelian stood as the last of Gallienus's top generals, concluding a power struggle spanning over a decade. Meanwhile, in Rome, the German advance ignited widespread panic and disorder. Mint workers initiated large-scale fraud, producing significantly debased and underweight coins, worsening the currency standards of the day. Felicissimus, the chief financial minister, was deeply involved in this corruption, bordering on treason. Challenged, he instigated the mint workers into rebellion, leading to his quick demise either by execution or other means. His death marked the start of severe violence in the city, unseen since the Republic's last decades. Recognizing the imminent threat of retaliation, the fraudulent mint workers initiated an uprising, incited by growing societal tensions and likely further fueled by the Palmyrene invasion of Egypt, shortly after Claudius's death, which disrupted Rome's grain supply. This widespread discontent quickly escalated into a full-blown riot. A group of senators, potentially fearing Aurelian due to their support for Quintillus, seized the chaos to conspire against the emperor, inflaming the angry mob. The resulting violent clash on the Caelian Hill between the unruly crowd and reinforced imperial troops resulted in substantial bloodshed, with reported casualties reaching 7,000, although this figure remains uncertain. Once order was regained, Aurelian executed a large number of those involved, including several senators, though their precise culpability remains debated. He subsequently closed the Rome Mint entirely, later incorporating some pardoned workers into his campaign. These actions addressed the immediate crisis, but Aurelian recognized the need to address the underlying issues to prevent future turmoil. In response, Aurelian launched initiatives that would leave a lasting mark. To mitigate future panic similar to that stirred by the German advance, he commissioned the construction of substantial defensive walls around Rome, which still bear his name today. Additionally, he reformed the debased monetary system and urban food supply. However, the ongoing threat of Palmyrene interference in Egypt, a critical lifeline for Rome, remained. Determined to confront this issue, Aurelian quietly planned a campaign against Palmyra. First, he needed to address urgent matters in the Balkans. Ensuring his authority was restored in Rome and the wall construction was underway, Aurelian gathered his army and departed for the Balkans in the summer. The Gothic War. Despite the attempts by Gallienus, Claudius, and Aurelian to neutralize the Gothic threat in the Balkans, their efforts were only partially successful. Aurelian had driven the Goths out of Moesia, but his ascension to emperor and consequent power struggle with Quintillus distracted him from establishing a permanent solution. Seizing the opportunity of Aurelian's preoccupation in Italy, the Goths reinvigorated their assault on Moesia and Thrace, causing significant damage. Arriving in the region in the early autumn of 271, Aurelian led a successful counteroffensive, pushing the Goths back across the Danube. Unsatisfied, he crossed into enemy territory, striking a resounding victory that included the death of the Gothic king, Cannabis, and the capture of many prisoners. During his later triumph in Rome, Aurelian showcased these captives, marking the most decisive Roman victory in the region within the tumultuous century, and earning him the title Gothicus Maximus. This significant triumph not only fortified the Danube frontier, but also bolstered the region's defense forces' morale and did much to reassert Roman authority in the region. However, more was required. The situation in Dacia remained fragile following Gallienus's partial withdrawal of Roman forces. Anticipating the need for a substantial army against the Palmyrenes, Aurelian ordered the total withdrawal of forces from Dacia, redrawing the defensive line along the Danube, which shortened the frontier significantly. He also relocated prominent Dacian citizens south of the river and potentially negotiated with the Goths to maintain the North's buffer role. As winter approached, Aurelian started preparations for the anticipated confrontation with Palmyra, focusing on recruitment, training, and logistics. He assembled a formidable army, comprising various forces including the Dalmatian horse, Mauritanian horse, and units drawn from the entire length of the Danube frontier. Additionally, he had an elite corps of veteran soldiers, likely the core of his original Italian campaign force, now supplemented by select troops from the available legions and auxiliaries. With the onset of spring, Aurelian, with his plans and preparations in place, led his massive army across the narrow strait separating Europe from Asia to Chalcedon. The stage was set for the next battle. The Palmyrene War. The mysterious assassination of Odaenathus of Palmyra has sparked various theories, ranging from political conspiracies involving Rome to internal family disputes. While the assassin and their motivation remain undisclosed, speculations suggest the involvement of a Roman official named Rufinus, or even Odaenathus's own nephew or widow, Zenobia. Following Odaenathus's death, the narrative becomes further complex due to uncertainties surrounding his sons' identities. However, the sole surviving son, Julius Septimius Verbalathus Athenodorus, was undeniably Zenobia's child. The exact date of Odaenathus's assassination is determined to be between August 267 and 268, with the location speculated to be either Syria's Emesa or Cappadocia. Despite the swirling theories and suspicions, Zenobia emerged as a prominent figure, swiftly assuming control to safeguard her husband's legacy and establish their son Verbalathus as his father's successor. Zenobia secured a stable rule for her son and Palmyra with the support of the military and nobility. Her son was still a minor, so she wielded the real power as queen and regent. She retained her husband's close associates, including his top generals. Zenobia's rule, however, strained the relations with Rome, especially as her son used the title Corrector Totius Orientis, which was not ratified by Gallienus or Claudius. She expanded her influence in the east, including regions like the Syrian desert, Arabia, Asia Minor, and Egypt. With Rome preoccupied with the Germanic invasions, she sent her general Zabdas to Roman Arabia, a move that led to the killing of Roman commander Crassus and the sacking of Bostra. The Palmyrene army then secured Arabia and Judea, with Egypt as the next target. The military campaign has been seen as an economic move to secure trade routes through Egypt, but it also underlines Zenobia's political motivations. As Zabdas and the Palmyrene army reached Egypt, the region was already in unrest, and local Palmyrene sympathizers joined forces with them to overpower the Roman garrison. Probus, the Roman commander in the region, managed to regain control of Alexandria briefly, but the Palmyrene forces soon retook the city, enjoying significant local support, including from the substantial Jewish community. Probus retreated south to Babylon to regroup with Roman troops. However, a Palmyrene contingent led by Timagenes surprised and defeated Probus's forces. With Probus's suicide, Zenobia effectively secured control of Egypt. Aurelian's war against Zenobia aimed to regain control over key parts of the empire she had claimed and to neutralize her as a threat. The crucial areas were Asia Minor, a significant contributor to the imperial treasury, and Egypt, the empire's primary source of grain. The recapture of Syria, especially Antioch, was also important, but secondary. To prevent a future resurgence of Palmyra's power, Zenobia had to be eliminated. Due to the urgency of retaking these regions, particularly before facing the strong defenses of Syria, Aurelian dispatched his fleet to reclaim Egypt, thereby also establishing a second battlefront. The Historia Augusta suggests that the pivotal naval mission to Egypt was led by the future emperor, Probus. While skeptics question this claim due to its unverified source, the decision by Aurelian to assign such an important task to his compatriot is plausible. The brief campaign concluded within weeks, despite latent support for Palmyrene in Egypt. The Palmyrene forces were likely limited, and the timeline, reconstructed from Egyptian papyri and coinage, suggests that Aurelian reclaimed Alexandria and the rest of Egypt by mid-June. Simultaneously, Aurelian led his army across Asia Minor. He was celebrated in Bithynia and welcomed peacefully at Ancyra. He advanced to the Cilician gates via Tyana, encountering resistance for the first time. Despite his initial fury, Aurelian, realizing the power of clemency over terror, spared the town. The Historia Augusta presents another explanation for Tyana's sparing, involving an apparition of Apollonius, a revered first-century Neo-Pythagorean philosopher, who convinced Aurelian to spare the town with a blend of wisdom and threats. However, the authenticity of this tale is dubious. Aurelian's strategy of leniency proved successful. As he descended into Cilicia, he was welcomed with open arms, easing his recapture of Asia Minor. However, ahead lay a formidable challenge, the recovery of Syria, the core of Palmyrene power. The Fall of Palmyra. Aware that Antioch would be Aurelian's primary target in Syria, Zenobia and her generals fortified it. They stationed their heavily armored cavalry, the Catabractarii, in the adjacent Orontes plain, an area conducive to their battle tactics. Aurelian, learning of the Palmyrene forces ahead, cleverly decided to circumnavigate the enemy, attacking from the east, where the terrain was less favorable to Palmyrene cavalry. However, Zabdas, Zenobia's general, deduced Aurelian's strategy and moved to block the imperial army. Aurelian, wary of the formidable Palmyrene cavalry, orchestrated a deceptive tactic. His cavalry feigned a retreat, luring the Palmyrene forces into exhausting pursuit before delivering a deadly countercharge. The result was a devastating defeat for the Palmyrene forces. Aurelian's ingenuity and the discipline of his cavalry were instrumental in this success. Despite not marking the end of the war, the Battle of Imai was a crucial turning point, weakening Zenobia's strongest asset, her heavy cavalry. Outsmarted and outnumbered, Zenobia had to abandon Antioch. To mask their retreat, a ruse was deployed. A man resembling Aurelian was paraded through the city, falsely announcing the Roman emperor's capture. Under the veil of darkness, Zenobia, Zabdas, and their retinue discreetly evacuated Antioch, relocating south to Emesa. When Antioch's citizens discovered the Palmyrene retreat, panic ensued. Fearing reprisals, many fled, while Aurelian, now in control of the city, generously offered a general pardon. His clemency encouraged the return of those in self-exile and further solidified his position as a liberator. Aurelian lingered at Antioch due to both administrative and military reasons. Years of contentious Palmyrene rule had resulted in several administrative complications, primarily the imperial mint, and potentially the Christian schism within Antioch. Militarily, The strategically placed Palmyrene garrison at Daphne required attention. Despite its small size, Aurelian opted for a direct assault using the famed Roman tortoise formation, enabling his troops to ascend the hill undeterred by the enemy, quickly overcoming the Palmyrenes. Additionally, Aurelian waited for reinforcements from various eastern units. His strengthened army included the original forces, a small group from Tyana, legionary reinforcements from the upper Euphrates Valley, and Palestinian auxiliaries. With the team assembled and the path to the south clear, Aurelian was prepared to pursue Zenobia to Emesa. As Aurelian advanced south, he received warm welcomes from each town. Upon reaching Emesa, he encountered a robust Palmyrene army on a terrain suited to their heavy cavalry. He tried a similar tactic as he used at Imai, which unfortunately misfired, leading to considerable losses for the Roman cavalry. However, in their overzealous pursuit, the Palmyrene army lost formation, and the Roman infantry successfully counterattacked, resulting in a devastating defeat for Palmyra. In the wake of this loss, Zenobia and her council decided to abandon Emesa and retreat to Palmyra. She left everything, including her treasury, behind as she fled to the desert city. Simultaneously, news reached her of Aurelian's naval force reclaiming Egypt. Meanwhile, Aurelian closed in on Emesa, welcomed by the city's open gates. Having reclaimed Egypt, Asia Minor, and western Syria, Aurelian shifted his focus to his second objective, neutralizing Zenobia and diminishing Palmyra's power. He braved the intense summer heat and pursued his adversary across the desert, battling guerrilla attacks from nomadic Arabs loyal to Zenobia. Upon reaching Palmyra, Aurelian initiated a siege while negotiating for food and supplies from disgruntled Bedouin tribes in the vicinity. Zenobia, underestimating the tribal alliances, remained defiant. She banked on the city's food reserves to withstand the siege, rejecting Aurelian's peace offer. Her only real chance was military assistance from Persia. Despite her late husband's notorious record against the Persians, King Shapur may have considered aiding Zenobia due to strategic interests. However, her desperate bid was thwarted by Persia's internal power struggle and Shapur's ailing health. Any Persian mercenaries trying to help the Palmyrenes likely didn't have official endorsement, and their effort proved ineffectual. Interestingly, Persian mercenaries, specifically archers, were aiding Aurelian. When a Palmyrene insulted Aurelian from the city walls, a Persian archer swiftly silenced him, cementing Persian allegiance with Aurelian. As the siege escalated, Zenobia, in a desperate bid for Persian help, secretly escaped the city at night, making a daring dash across the desert. Aurelian dispatched a cavalry unit, capturing her near the Euphrates. The news of Zenobia's capture splintered Palmyra's resolve. Some wished to continue the fight, but many started to surrender, offering gifts and sacrifices to Aurelian, who graciously accepted and pardoned each of them. The surrender soon swelled into a flood, ending Palmyra's resistance without further bloodshed, and with a collective sigh of relief, Aurelian claimed Palmyra. Triumph in Rome. While Aurelian displayed mercy towards the general populace of Palmyra, similar to his actions in Asia Minor and western Syria, he did not extend the same clemency to those who instigated the revolt. Key figures, including Zenobia and her advisors, were apprehended and trialed. A garrison was installed to monitor Palmyra, its defenses were weakened, and a significant portion of its military equipment was seized. The war had incurred substantial costs, and Aurelian sought to recoup them by extracting the wealth of Palmyra. Public and private treasures were taken, although it's unclear whether they were willingly given or forcibly confiscated. The unrest caused disruption along the eastern frontier. However, major conflict with the Persians was averted due to their own internal issues. Minor clashes took place, after which the Persians sent an embassy to Aurelian seeking peace. In return, they presented him with an exceptionally dyed purple cloak, allowing him to assume the title of Persicus Maximus. Having reached an agreement with Persia, Aurelian delegated the reintegration of the region into the empire and the restructuring of the Euphrates frontier defenses to Marcellinus, one of his trusted generals. With the eastern frontier stable, Aurelian journeyed back to Emesa, bringing spoils and captives with him. At Emesa, Zenobia and her advisors were trialed. Zenobia was spared execution not due to her rank or gender, but for Aurelian's intent to display her in his planned Roman triumph. He paraded the captive queen through various Syrian cities, and in Antioch, she was exhibited in chains at the Hippodrome, serving to dissolve any residual support for her. Aurelian then, having achieved stability in the East and adopting the title Restorer of the World, headed to Europe with his captives and spoils. Despite a storm disrupting the crossing of the Bosphorus, they safely reached Byzantium. Upon reaching Byzantium, Aurelian was met with troubling news. The Carpi had breached the Danube and were wreaking havoc in Moesia and Thrace. Despite the year drawing to a close, Aurelian promptly countered the invasion. The campaign's specifics remain obscure, but its success is unquestionable, with the Carpi entirely defeated and repelled by winter's end. Aurelian took the pioneering step of settling a sizable portion of the Carpi within the Roman frontier, earning him the title Carpicus Maximus. However, this triumph was soon overshadowed by concerning reports from Marcellinus. After Aurelian's departure to Europe, dissent began to brew in Palmyra, likely fueled by their recent defeats and consequential losses. Apseus, a Palmyrene noble linked with Zenobia who had evaded punishment, emerged as a leader of this dissatisfied faction. He tested Marcellinus's loyalty to Aurelian, enticing him to switch allegiances. Marcellinus, maintaining his loyalty, appeared to consider their proposition while simultaneously alerting Aurelian. On receiving this ominous message, Aurelian acted swiftly. Foregoing elaborate preparations, he promptly assembled his army and embarked across Asia Minor. Speed was crucial to leverage Marcellinus's vigilance and loyalty effectively. After an arduous journey, Aurelian arrived in Antioch by early spring, catching the Antiochenes off guard during their hippodrome horse races. Here he learned of the worsening situation in Palmyra, where Apseus had led a rebellion, eliminated the Roman garrison, and declared Septimius Antiochus as king. Speculatively linked to Zenobia, Antiochus was likely her son from a post-Odaenathus relationship, and would have been a mere child during the revolt. Undeterred, Aurelian marched on Palmyra for the second time within a year. The unprepared rebels couldn't withstand the swift and decisive Roman onslaught. Inscriptions suggest internal assistance from Septimius Hadoudan, a prominent Palmyrene priest. Given the rebellion's exploitation of Aurelian's previous leniency, the city braced for a harsh response. However, despite dire predictions, Aurelian's reaction was once again tempered. While key insurgents were punished, Apseus likely being among them, wanton reprisals were avoided. Even Antiochus was spared due to his young age and minor role and instead was sent into exile. The city itself suffered more significantly, with the soldiers showing less restraint than before. Palmyra's stunning structures were pillaged and its wealth appropriated, some of which would adorn the new temple of Saul Invictus in Rome. Some infrastructure damage occurred, including dismantling the city's fortifications, although the primary monument, the Temple of Bel, probably remained unscathed. However, the devastation of Palmyra's military and economic bedrock was so complete that it never recovered. Its bustling market was relocated north to Batnai, and the desert-based sheikhs, who previously safeguarded the caravans, retreated back to their origins. The once thriving trade hub dwindled to an unremarkable provincial town on the Roman Empire's periphery, its past glory fading into obscurity. Syria's Palmyrene resurgence provoked a similar uprising in Alexandria, led by a wealthy merchant, Firmus. Leveraging his wealth and ties, Firmus stirred up considerable unrest. Though his ultimate aims remain unclear, his rebellion likely never grew beyond severe public unrest and violence, resulting in substantial damage in Alexandria, including the prosperous Bruchian district. Reports of these disturbances reached Aurelian in Syria, who, having quelled the issues in Palmyra, quickly moved to suppress the fledgling Egyptian revolt. Firmus was executed, restoring order in Egypt, crucial for Rome's grain supply. With the East pacified, Aurelian returned to Rome by year's end, receiving a rousing welcome. As consul in 274, he began a coinage reform and preparations for his grand new Temple of Saul and a triumphant parade. However, unfinished business lingered in Britain, Gaul, and Germany, which still recognized an emperor at Augusta Treverorum since Postumus's revolt in 260. There is debate concerning Zenobia's fate. Some claim she died en route to Rome, while others assert she survived and was paraded in Aurelian's triumph, adorned in golden chains and jewels. Instead of an expected public execution, most sources concur she was granted an imperial pardon and allowed a dignified retirement near Rome. Zenobia's descendants were reportedly known in Rome a century later, possibly from marrying into the Roman nobility. The fate of her son Vabalithus is uncertain. He may have joined her in retirement and been responsible for her surviving lineage. Likewise, Antiochus's fate after his deportation remains unknown. Zenobia's daughters, only mentioned by Zonaras, are said to have been married into the Roman nobility, but this claim lacks corroborative evidence. The reunification of the empire. As summer dawned in 274, Aurelian was prepared to confront his Western rival, culminating the remarkable sequence of events triggered by Postumus's revolt 14 years prior. To fully understand this campaign, it's vital to recap the preceding events leading to Aurelian's march into Gaul. When Postumus was lynched by his own soldiers at Mainz in the spring of 269, his anomalous position might have been expected to vanish with him. Despite his demise, his successful reign and lengthy tenure had built considerable political momentum. The persisting military requirements in the region and the soldiers' apprehensions of reprisals from the emperor for their prolonged disloyalty quickly proclaimed a successor in Postumus's place. Their initial choice, Aurelius Marius, lacked the leadership qualities of his predecessor, resulting in a swift dissipation of army support. After a brief and unhappy reign, Marius was replaced by Victorinus, a more fitting successor who held a prestigious position in Postumus's Praetorian Guard. However, Postumus's death prompted some Western provinces to realign their loyalties towards Rome, notably Spain and the Aedui in central Gaul. This brought complications for Victorinus, who in 270 had to lay siege to the Aedui's principal city, Augustodunum. Despite the citizens' pleas, Emperor Claudius, occupied by the Gothic invasion, could only station a garrison to safeguard Italy. After a prolonged siege, Augustodunum's desperate citizens capitulated, resulting in Victorinus giving his soldiers a free hand to sack the city, causing widespread devastation. Victorinus's reign came to an abrupt end with his assassination in Cologne in the spring of 271, allegedly over a scandal involving his officers' wives. He was succeeded by Tetricus, the governor of Aquitania. Although there are claims Tetricus was influenced by Victorinus's affluent mother to accept his position, the authenticity of these stories remains debatable. For almost 15 years from the mid-260s, Gallienus and Postumus found themselves in a tense military impasse, primarily caused by the strategic wedge the Alemanni drove between the Rhine and Danube armies. Rome's emperors, including Gallienus and Claudius, pursued a policy of containment, evident in the positioning of Aureolus in Milan and Placidianus's stationing in the Rhone Valley. Claims that Claudius initiated an offensive in Narbonensis to regain control of the Alpine passes remain unproven, with no concrete evidence supporting the assumption that Postumus controlled this entire region. Logically, Gallienus's march against Postumus would have required control over these passes, suggesting his strategic choice to station Aureolus at Milan was primarily to safeguard Italy from the Alemanni, Juthungi, and Rhine armies. By the time Tetricus ascended to power in late 271, Aurelian was already firmly in command of the empire's central region. Tetricus must have found solace in Aurelian's preoccupations elsewhere, the threatening Goths in the Balkans and the mounting issues in Palmyra. Aurelian's decision to undertake a risky campaign in eastern Syria, leaving Tetricus in Gaul, signaled his confidence in controlling the Alpine passes and his robust garrison on the lower Rhone. 2 years later, Aurelian's triumphant return from the east signaled an impending clash with Tetricus. His decision not to immediately celebrate his victory suggested Aurelian's attentions were already shifting towards his next challenge. At the onset, Tetricus's reign appeared steady, with the Rhine army content under his leadership, and his initial campaigns against the Franks proving successful. However, financial difficulties soon loomed, evidenced by the further depreciation of an already debased coinage. In 273, Tetricus lavished numerous honors on his young son, also named Tetricus, including raising him to the status of Caesar. The aim was likely to fortify his rule through this dynastic arrangement, a strategy communicated via coinage celebrating his noble lineage. This sense of insecurity was reinforced when, after the father-son duo took a joint consulship, Tetricus urged soldiers and subjects to renew vows of loyalty, a ceremony usually reserved for the start or 5th anniversary of a reign. By the first half of 274, with Aurelian's impending military intervention, tensions between Tetricus and his army seemed to escalate. The authenticity of these rifts remains contested, potentially tainted by Aurelianic propaganda. Nonetheless, a rebellion led by one of Tetricus's provincial governors, Faustinus, indicates real discord. Although the uprising was likely brief and perhaps located in Tetricus's capital, Augusta Treverorum, it exposed the vulnerability of Tetricus's authority. This incident, along with the advancing threat of Aurelian, significantly undermined Tetricus's authority. Anticipating a predictable outcome in Aurelian's favor, savvy provincial governors under Tetricus likely prepared for a shift in allegiance, leaving Tetricus in an unfavorable position to face Aurelian's disciplined and victorious forces. Aurelian, after addressing administrative and monetary reforms in Rome during spring 274, prepared to face Tetricus. He crossed the Alps, probably via the St. Bernard Pass, and met his vanguard at Grenoble. From there, he advanced through Rhone and Saone valleys, reclaiming Lugdunum, and intended to hit Tetricus's power center on the Moselle. Meanwhile, Tetricus mobilized significant forces from the Rhine to stall Aurelian at Chalons. The decisive battle ensued at the Catalonian fields. Despite fierce fighting, Aurelian's superior leadership and disciplined troops prevailed. Tetricus was captured, leading to panic among his forces and a disastrous defeat. One account implies Tetricus, weary and resigned to his fate, had negotiated his surrender with Aurelian before the battle. Yet the timing and ensuing carnage cast doubts on this story. The decimation of the Rhine army hindered the defense of the Rhine frontier, which became Aurelian's responsibility. The tale of Tetricus's surrender likely originates from panegyrics praising Aurelian or his officers. However, Aurelian's subsequent leniency towards Tetricus contrasts with his cruel image. Post-battle, Tetricus was sent to Rome, while Aurelian focused on consolidating the western provinces, including reinforcing the Rhine defenses against the Alemanni threat. Aurelian's further fortifications across Gaul are also attributed to this period. By autumn, he returned to Rome for a well-deserved triumph, parading the captured Tetricus and Zenobia. Despite his humiliation, Tetricus's life was spared, with Aurelian reconfirming his and his son's senatorial status. Additionally, Tetricus was granted administrative authority over Lucania, reflecting Aurelian's penchant for demonstrating clemency over making martyrs of his enemies. Reintegrating the western provinces, fragmented by years of political strife, demanded tact. Aurelian, instead of vilifying his vanquished rival Tetricus, showed restraint in administration. Historical inscriptions and numismatic evidence reflect his decision to avoid damnatio memoriae, or the condemnation of the previous regime's memory. He preserved the coins of Tetricus and his predecessors, ensuring their abundant presence in coin hoards. Aurelian further embraced continuity by retaining and even promoting Tetricus's local appointees, thus minimizing disruptions in the post-war administration. This continuity is exemplified by an anonymous figure, believed to have served under Postumus and his successors, who ascended the administrative ladder and was eventually honored in Rome. Aurelian, however, deemed the relocation of the Gallic mint from Augusta Treverorum to Lugdunumas politically prudent, given Augusta Treverorum's precarious position near the Rhine frontier and its association with previous political discord. Numismatic evidence post-reunification displays unique patterns at the Lugdunum mint, and some scholars interpret these anomalies as indications of continued resistance to Rome. Yet such claims are speculative, and these oddities can be better attributed to local economic conditions. Evidence of further resistance to Aurelian's authority is scant and somewhat cryptic, such as an account in Zonaras of Aurelian quelling unrest in Gaul in 275. Yet the relocation of the mint to Lugdunum suggests Aurelian's faith in the city's loyalty as it continued to function smoothly under his rule, contradicting allegations of harsh treatment. The vague account of a disturbance in Gaul during Aurelian's final year might reflect minor civil unrest or banditry rather than widespread political rebellion. Despite various interpretations, it's unfounded to suggest Lugdunum remained allegiant to Tetricus or the Gallic cause. The last year. Aurelian's military endeavors during his last year remain obscure. We can ascertain that the threat from barbarians didn't lessen, prompting Aurelian's vigorous response. From the sparse literary references, we can identify 3 or 4 likely zones of military activity. Evidence for campaigns in Gaul, and/or Raetia is somewhat ambiguous. A subsequent Balkan campaign is better documented, although details are scarce. Finally, there's an indication that Aurelian intended a large-scale eastern offensive against the long-standing foe Persia. Our knowledge of Aurelian's military actions in the first half of 275 primarily rests on two fleeting references. The Historia Augusta notes a campaign in Raetia and the clearing of barbarians near Vindelicorum, while Zonaras mentions upheaval in Gaul. Existing literary sources unanimously agree that Aurelian was assassinated in Thrace at Kinfrurium, a minor checkpoint between Byzantium and Perinthus. However, they differ on what drew him there. Syncellus and Zonaras attribute his presence to a campaign against the Goths, while the Historia Augusta suggests he was en route to the eastern frontier to launch a major offensive against Persia, with no mention of a Balkan campaign. Despite the ambiguity, a Danubian campaign in summer of 275 is chronologically plausible and fits with well-informed Greek sources of Balkan events in this era. Additionally, Malalas mentions an unspecified war initiated by Aurelian towards the end of his reign, implying it was ongoing when he was killed, possibly in the Balkans. Nevertheless, many modern scholars lean towards the Historia Augusta's account, positing that Aurelian's death near Byzantium indicates his Oriental journey. Yet, the exact location of his assassination and the suggested westerly travel direction could point towards a Balkan campaign. There is no corroboration of a Persian expedition outside the Historia Augusta, and its reliability is in question. While a Gothic campaign in the Balkans seems most plausible, it does not exclude Aurelian's preparations for a Persian campaign. He may have fought successfully on the Danube in the summer of 275 and planned another eastern campaign during his fatal autumn. However, the precise details of Aurelian's late summer and early autumn 275 campaigns remain uncertain. Christian authors connect Aurelian's demise to his proposed reinstatement of Christian persecution, depicting it as divine retribution. While some, like Lactantius, are explicit, others subtly link his assassination to his cruelty. Victor connects it to Aurelian's harsh handling of corrupt provincial officials, while the Historia Augusta attributes it to the emperor's extreme cruelty towards his immediate staff. However, neither divine wrath nor Aurelian's severity offer satisfying historical explanations for the assassination motives. A more intriguing assertion is Malalas's claim that Aurelian was killed by his army due to poor command, which contradicts Aurelian's track record of remarkable military victories. This might instead point to a strained relationship with his men, possibly due to overbearing discipline enforcement. However, reports about Aurelian's strict discipline could be somewhat overstated. The assassination plot's compelling detail is the story preserved in various sources about a slave or freedman in Aurelian's secretarial staff who deceived the assassins. Known as Eros, he feared the emperor's severe displeasure. Capable of imitating Aurelian's handwriting, he forged documents indicting and condemning several officers in the emperor's inner circle. Believing their lives were at stake, the officers conspired under General Mucapor. When the army stopped at Cainafrurium, they seized the opportunity when Aurelian was without his bodyguard and assassinated him. The sudden assassination of the esteemed emperor plunged the empire into deep shock and disbelief. Especially the army, who respected Aurelian for his stringent discipline and military triumphs, mourned the loss of their leader. This remorse, however, was tainted by the discovery of their fellow officers' complicity in the crime, a baseless act of self-defense instigated by a lying secretary named Eros. Eros was promptly executed, and an elaborate funeral was held for the fallen emperor. The assassination, driven by paranoia rather than political motivation, had left no plans for a successor. As the perceived threat that had driven the assassins proved false, there was no political rallying point for potential successors. This, coupled with an overall feeling of insecurity, led to a period of political paralysis. Rome, upon receiving the news of the assassination, was also struck with grief. Even the Senate, which had a complicated relationship with Aurelian, felt unease rather than relief. However, the days of the Senate leading the choice of an imperial successor were past. In a state of resignation, they waited for news of a successor declared by the army in Thrace. There are disputes about the duration of the interregnum and the interim governance of the empire. Some sources suggest a hiatus of 6 months, during which the Senate ruled and eventually chose Tacitus, a high-ranking senator, as the successor. However, a more plausible pattern suggests it was a military coup, and the army acclaimed Tacitus. Final thoughts. Aurelian ruled from 270 to 275 AD, and was undeniably one of Rome's most consequential leaders, an extraordinary figure often overlooked in the annals of history. Born into humble origins, his meteoric rise to power was a testament to his prowess and tenacity. Aurelian's reign, although brief, was nothing short of remarkable. It was he who effectively rescued a crumbling empire from the brink of collapse. The restorer of the world, as he came to be known, faced the daunting task of reuniting a fragmented Rome, then beset by internal strife and external threats. Aurelian rose to the challenge with strategic brilliance and relentless determination. He quelled the Palmyrene and Gallic empires, effectively reunifying the Roman Empire after a period of significant fragmentation. His military campaigns were characterized by boldness and ingenuity, and his victories not only consolidated Rome's territorial integrity, but also bolstered its prestige. However, despite his spectacular military accomplishments, Aurelian was a hard taskmaster, a fact that cost him dearly. His rigorous enforcement of military discipline made him many enemies within his ranks. His reputation as a strict disciplinarian, while arguably necessary for Rome's survival during this tumultuous period, also precipitated his untimely end. In the end, his life was tragically cut short by the treachery of his own officers, who, acting on false information, assassinated him. In my opinion, Aurelian remains one of Rome's most effective, but also most underappreciated emperors. His significant contributions to restoring the might of Rome are often overshadowed by the longer reigns of emperors like Augustus or Marcus Aurelius. Nonetheless, Aurelian's brilliant military strategies and his determination to restore Rome deserve greater recognition. His efforts to stabilize the empire, protect its boundaries, and re-establish Rome's glory, even at the cost of personal popularity, demonstrate a leader whose commitment to his realm was beyond reproach. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm contemplating making videos on the Gallic Empire and the Palmyrene Empire. Please let me know if those topics would interest you. Otherwise, I hope you'll watch the next video in this series, which will be on Tacitus.